Sam Elliott has long been the epitome of stoic charm. His gravelly voice, slow drawl, and weathered face have made him one of Hollywood's most enduring symbols of masculinity. For over 5 decades, he's played the cowboy, the soldier, the drifter, the man who speaks little but means every word. But behind the scenes, away from the leather boots and silver spurs, Elliott harbored a silence not just born of wisdom, but of restraint. Because in an industry full of egos, betrayals, and phoniness, Sam Elliott has quietly kept a list. A list of those who crossed him, actors he never respected. Collaborators who, despite their fame or fortune, rubbed him the wrong way with arrogance, laziness, or sheer disrespect for the craft. For years, Elliott refused to name names. It wasn't his style. He let the work speak louder than words. But now, at 81, with nothing left to prove and everything left to say, the cowboy has finally lowered the brim of his hat and spoken. In rare interviews, off-the-record conversations, and moments when the cameras weren't supposed to be rolling, Sam Elliott has revealed the 7 actors who, in his own words, he couldn't stomach, and the reasons behind each one. They range from bitter feuds to shattered respect, to one on-set betrayal he swore he'd never forget. This isn't just a list of grudges. It's a glimpse into the quiet fury of a man who built a career on honor, only to watch some of his peers trample all over it. These are the 7 actors Sam Elliott utterly hated, and now, after a lifetime of silence, he's naming them one by one. The first name Sam Elliott ever hinted at with real distaste was Val Kilmer, a fellow actor he once shared the screen with in the 1993 Western classic Tombstone, a film that, to fans, remains iconic. But behind the bullets, mustaches, and smoke-filled saloons, tension brewed like a thunderstorm ready to snap. Kilmer played the unforgettable Doc Holliday, a role that earned him widespread acclaim. But according to those close to the production, and to Elliott himself, Kilmer's intensity on set was matched only by his ego. From the beginning, Sam Elliott sensed a problem. Kilmer, immersed in method acting, rarely broke character, speaking in a southern drawl even off-camera, strutting across the set like a man possessed. To many it was commitment. To Elliott it was pretension. Elliott, a seasoned professional raised on discipline and quiet toughness, had no patience for actors who let performance bleed into personality. One crew member recalled a day when Kilmer refused to rehearse a scene unless his aura was respected. Elliott, hearing this, is said to have muttered, "Your aura ain't part of the damn script." The tension escalated when Kilmer began giving unsolicited notes, not just to lesser-known actors, but to veterans like Elliott and Kurt Russell. Elliott, known for keeping his cool, reportedly confronted Kilmer privately, warning him to stay in his lane. But Kilmer's behavior didn't change. He continued dominating scenes, pushing for extra takes, questioning direction, and, in Elliott's words later shared in an off-camera moment, trying to turn a Western into a one-man opera. The final straw came during a late-night shoot, when Kilmer stormed off set after a minor costume disagreement. Elliott, exhausted and seething, walked into the production trailer and declared, "That boy might be the best Doc Holliday anyone's seen, but he ain't someone I'd ever ride with again." Even years later, when asked about Tombstone, Elliott rarely mentioned Kilmer by name. He'd praised the story, the cinematography, the camaraderie of most of the cast, but always stopped short of saying one particular co-star's name. For a man like Elliott, that omission was deliberate. In Hollywood, silence can speak louder than slander, and in his silence, Elliott made it clear. Kilmer might have played a legend, but off-camera, he was no partner. No brother, no cowboy. Just another actor too caught up in his reflection to see the damage he was doing. Elliott never publicly trashed him, but he never worked with him again either. And for a man who rarely breaks ties, that distance said everything. The second name on Sam Elliott's quietly infamous list is one that stunned many: Richard Gere. To the outside world, both men stood as symbols of a certain kind of masculinity, one rugged and raw, the other smooth and refined. But when the two were briefly attached to the same production in the late 1980s, a film that would ultimately never be made, Elliott got a close-up view of what he later called Hollywood at its most hollow. According to insiders, Elliott had signed on to play a grizzled mentor figure opposite Gere's younger lead. It was a story about honor, redemption, and aging in a world that had moved on. Sam was drawn to the role because it felt honest, stripped down, something he could sink into with truth. But from the very first table read, he realized he was dealing with a man who didn't respect the process. Gere showed up late, distracted, treating the script like an afterthought. Elliott, famously no-nonsense, sat quietly, letting it slide until Gere began suggesting changes. Not minor ones either. He wanted lines rewritten, character arcs shifted, entire emotional beats removed because, as he allegedly said, audiences don't care about that stuff anymore. That was the moment Elliott checked out. To him, storytelling wasn't about surface. It was about soul. And watching an actor reduce a heartfelt narrative into a glossy product felt like betrayal. Their working relationship crumbled fast. Elliott later confided to a director friend that Gere was the kind of actor who'd walk through fire if a mirror was on the other side. Gere, for his part, never addressed the tension publicly, but the project quietly dissolved. And neither man ever sought collaboration again. What bothered Elliott most wasn't ego. He'd worked with plenty of big personalities. It was the lack of sincerity, the performance before purpose mentality. Gere treated scenes like runway walks, Elliott believed, caring more about how he looked than what he felt. It was the antithesis of everything Elliott stood for. And if you're finding these rare revelations as compelling as we are, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more untold stories from Hollywood's inner circle, and comment below with the actor you think Sam Elliott respected the most or despised. Because behind every quiet legend is a fire that's rarely seen, and Elliott's silent fury tells us more about his character than 1,000 interviews ever could. He may never have badmouthed Gere in the tabloids, but in Elliott's world, respect is sacred, and once it's gone, there's no getting it back. The third actor, Sam Elliott, couldn't stand as someone he once respected, Tom Berenger, a name that might surprise fans who remember the two sharing space in westerns and war dramas throughout the 80s and early 90s. But behind the camera, Elliott and Berenger had a falling out so severe it nearly turned physical. The tension peaked on the set of a now-forgotten cable western, where both men were cast as opposite ends of the moral spectrum. Elliott, the weary lawman, and Berenger, the charismatic outlaw. On paper, it was magic, but from the moment shooting began, Elliott knew something was wrong. Berenger, fresh off a string of high-profile roles, came to set with an ego inflated by fame. He constantly questioned direction, rewrote his own lines, and according to crew members, treated everyone around him like background noise. Elliott, a man who valued respect and routine, found it infuriating. On one particularly grueling day in the desert, with the sun boiling overhead and tensions already high, Berenger arrived hours late to a scene that required both actors on horseback. When he finally did show up, he mocked the delay as if it were a joke, slapping crew on the back and smirking through rehearsals. Elliott stood stone-faced, jaw clenched, saying nothing. But when Berenger tried to improvise during a pivotal exchange, changing the scene's entire emotional tone, Elliott stopped mid-line and stared him down. Witnesses recall Elliott walking off set, removing his hat and muttering through clenched teeth, "I don't ride with fools." After that day, their dynamic never recovered. Elliott refused to engage with Berenger outside of required scenes. He didn't eat with him, didn't speak to him, didn't even make eye contact unless the cameras were rolling. For Elliott, professionalism is sacred, and Berenger's casual disregard for the work, the story, and the people around him crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Years later, when asked in an interview if there were any actors he'd never work with again, Elliott paused just long enough to make his silence sting. He didn't need to say the name. Those who were there knew. The story made its way through industry circles like wildfire. Some say a fight nearly broke out in the final days of filming, but Elliott's respect for the crew kept him from throwing a punch. Still, the fury was unmistakable. For Elliott, acting wasn't a playground. It was a craft, built on discipline and humility. And when someone like Berenger came crashing through it with arrogance and disrespect, Elliott's patience burned out fast. It wasn't personal fame that bothered him. It was when fame made someone forget the code. And once that happened, Sam Elliott made one thing very clear. There was no saddle big enough for two men riding in different directions. As the list rounds out, the final four names Sam Elliott couldn't stand tell a deeper story, not just of conflict, but of values. First among them was Stephen Baldwin, the youngest of the Baldwin brothers, whose antics during the filming of a low-budget action western clashed violently with Elliott's no-nonsense work ethic. While Elliott showed up prepared, grounded, and respectful of every crew member on set, Baldwin often acted like the set was his personal playground, goofing off during emotional takes, taking selfies with props, and constantly checking his phone mid-scene. For Elliott, it wasn't just unprofessional, it was childish. He reportedly told a crew member, "He treats the set like it's recess, and we're here to bury bodies." From that point forward, Elliott kept his distance and, according to some, nearly walked off the film entirely. Then came Rob Schneider, someone Elliott never even worked with, but openly dismissed in interviews when asked about comedy actors crossing into drama. Elliott found Schneider's slapstick style obnoxious, even referring to him in one off-camera moment as the type of actor that cheapens a scene just by walking into it. It wasn't personal, it was principle. Elliott believed some people didn't earn their place at the table, and said so with that same gravelly conviction that had become his trademark. The sixth name, though rarely spoken aloud by Elliott, was Alec Baldwin, whom he reportedly clashed with during an award show appearance in the early 2000s. While no footage of their behind-the-scenes interaction exists, one industry insider claims Baldwin mocked Elliott's cowboy act within earshot. Elliott didn't respond, but simply walked away, and never appeared at the same event again. For a man raised on respect, even a joke can land like a slap when it crosses the line. But the final and most shocking name of all was Nicolas Cage. Yes, the Academy Award winner, the cult icon. And yet to Elliott, Cage represented everything he detested about the evolution of Hollywood. Elliott once described Cage's performances as acting without listening, a method so erratic and self-indulgent that it turned scenes into showcases rather than storytelling. They had only one brief encounter, at a dinner party hosted by a producer. And Elliott reportedly walked out halfway through the evening, later telling a friend, "That man chews scenery like it's the only meal he's ever had." What connects all these names isn't just Elliott's dislike. It's the deeper thread of betrayal. Betrayal of craft, betrayal of discipline, betrayal of a certain unspoken code that men like Sam Elliott have lived by for decades. Show up, shut up, do the work, and leave your ego at the door. When others failed to live up to that, Elliott didn't scream. He didn't tweet. He didn't write tell-all books. He simply moved on and made sure they were never welcome in his world again. In the end, these weren't just grudges. They were boundaries, drawn by a man who had earned the right to draw them. Because while Hollywood is filled with bright lights, louder voices, and larger-than-life egos, Sam Elliott remains a silhouette in the dust, quiet, firm, and unshakable. A cowboy not just by costume, but by code. And if you ever wondered what it takes to lose the respect of a man like that, now you know.